The Liebherr LR1600 is a heavy crawler crane and it has a maximum capacity of 600 tonnes. And you need to have a large capacity too because it comes in a big box weighing over 13 kilos. It comes in a large outer shipping container and the model box takes up the whole space. The box style is a standard Liebherr design. There's a photo of the model on one side and photos of the real crane on the other. But there is no information about the real crane. The model is contained in 3 expanded polystyrene trays which are factory sealed. And as you can see, there are a large number of pieces in each of the 3 trays. A feature of the packaging is the really high quality wrapping of all the parts. It's such a good job that it almost feels a shame to unwrap it. Included with the model is a comprehensive instruction manual that shows all of the parts. There's a reeving diagram for the A-frame, but it's not right, so you can download an updated version from the NZG website. And there are plenty of other schematic pictures. It is quite a good manual, but not every detail is explained. And a model like this could easily have one twice the size. For the initial assembly, we'll just build up the crane with a short main boom. And the first task is to reeve up the A-frame. The luffing winches come pre-wound with a single piece of thread, and the first thing you have to do is to take it all off. And that's because you need to reeve up the A-frame with just one continuous thread. Once you've got it off, it's best to then temporarily support the A-frame, and that's done here with just an extra piece of thread. The pulleys at the back are also on a pivot, so the best thing to do is to use ye olde elastic band. By using it in this high-tech manner, you can then support the pulleys in a way that also gives it a bit of flex, which is handy when you're reeving up. However, reeving up is a long and painstaking job, 2 hours worth at least. And doing it this way, both threads are being reeved simultaneously, starting in the middle and working outwards along the pulley bank. Anyway, 3 seconds later and there's the job done. And the good news is that once it's done you don't ever need to undo it, because once it's reeved up you never need to undo it even if you dismantle the model. Just like all the other winch drums, this one has a spring-loaded action with a nice positive brake. And you wind it using a key. One nice touch is that the real crane has hydraulic rams which are used to push up the A-frame when it first arrives on site. And NZG has modelled these well with nice telescopic mechanisms. At this point we'll add our first bit of detail to the crane, which is some handrails around the cab. These just slot in and they're a reasonably good fixing. Time to turn to some more weighty matters, so we'll add some ballast trays, and these attach on each side of the crawler centre section. These are retained in place by nice little L-bolts, but they're not easy to do if you've got large diameter fingers. Luckily, a much easier job is to add the 3 counterweight ballast plates on either side. And these are then followed by metal walkways which hook into place. These are all well-made metal parts and they fit nicely. To allow the CranesEtcTV team safe access, it's nice to provide some stairs and they just slot into place. And then there's no excuse for not going up top and adding some more ballast trays. These ones just hang in place, and there's a protective handrail that clips in too, and that stops you falling in and getting mashed up by all of the winches. Next we have a show of real skill where both hands are being used at once to load up the ballast trays. Just outstanding. Let's now go for a bit more safety and clip on a long handrail which goes on the right hand side of the body. And again it's a nicely fitting piece. These are the parts for a short main boom configuration. And the boom foot is a nice part, with winch number 6 being able to be set in an operating or transport position. To join the pieces up, the connections are made in a high quality way using tiny brass nuts and bolts. And special tools are provided with the model to enable you to do that. Here the bolt has been installed in a special holder, and if you need to you can gently screw it in through the paint thicknesses to get the holes to line up. Most times though they'll just go straight through, and then you feed a nut into the special holder, pop it onto the end of the bolt, and then you can do it up, and there's no need to do it too tightly. Once it's done up, it makes a good strong positive connection. Repeat the process for the other bolts, and here's one I prepared earlier. It's a short main boom, and it's also got a short auxiliary lift head attached. This is a nice part because it's hinged, so it doesn't take the whole weight of the boom when it's horizontal. With your stiff main boom in your hands, you can now push it into position. It slots in easy enough, and you can use a small screwdriver to line up the holes if you need to, and then you can just feed in a silver screw that holds it into position. There's also a nut that fits on the end, and that holds it completely secure. The guys on this model are excellent and realistic, and they're connected with the same nut and bolt system but using rather longer bolts. With the boom connected up, the next job is to reeve the hooks, and for the main hook block, definitely the best thing to do is to suspend it from the end of the boom. Here a short temporary chain is used to hang it, and it just makes reeving up much easier, particularly as for this block you need thread from 2 winch drums. With the basic assembly all done, it's time to add some more detail, and there are handrails to put around the winches on the boom. The spring-loaded backstops that prevent the boom from being raised vertical need to be positioned on the runners that are just on the top edge of the crane body. The last bit of detail to add in this configuration is some more walkways and platforms, and these all just press in down the left-hand side of the model. Again, they're metal parts that give the model a nice realistic look, and that completes this configuration of the crane. The crawler centre section is nicely detailed with pipes, but the hydraulic jacks do have screw threads. The metal crawler tracks are very finely detailed, and the track frames look really good too. One very nice touch is that the mesh walkways have lifting lugs. The cab has a very good interior, and the external detail is very good too. At the boom foot, slewing motors and hydraulic hoses are detailed. The winch drums look good, and there are textured walking surfaces on top. The counterweight blocks have sharp graphics, and all of the pulleys are metal. The lattice sections are nicely made, complete with bracing at the ends. And they're very straight and scaled well, so jib sections can sit inside boom sections for economic transport. The mesh walkways and handrails on the boom look great, and they're matched by the high quality metal guys. At the boom head, the complex arrangement is modelled really well, and the metal hook blocks are of a high standard too. The complex lattice work of the jib struts is geometrically perfect and pleasing to the eye. The ballast carrier is also excellently engineered with high quality details. Starting with the crawler tracks, they are pinned to the centre section, so if you remove those pins you can take the crawler tracks off, and that means the model is great to display as transport loads. All you need are some suitably large trucks and a few blokes who look like they stand around, and then you've got a nice display. The crawler tracks themselves are nicely made parts. They're quite stiff, but you can turn them easily enough by hand. And they're spring-loaded at one end to keep the tension in the tracks and stop them becoming unhooked. A particularly nice feature is that the lifting points are provided, so you can pose the track frames being lifted properly. With the tracks off, there are 4 hydraulic jacks that the crane can use to lift itself up, and NZG have made these to be functional on the model. The pads get secured to the ends of the pistons by small plastic pins, but in reality steel pins would have been much better. Once the pads are attached, it's easy to lower the jacks by unscrewing the pistons. To secure the pistons in a vertical position, there's another small pin that gets added. With all 4 jacks set up, you can then pose the model unloading its own crawler tracks. All of the usual crane functions of the model work well. Slewing the crane round is very sure-footed and steady, and the cab tilts well and can hold a pose. The winches get operated by a key, although a couple in the crane get obstructed by either the counterweight or the A-frame rams, and if you wanted you could use an electric screwdriver to speed things up. One of the great features of the model is that you can build it in different ways, and one of those configurations is just to have a long straight boom using the reducer section in the middle. This gives a simple but impressive model, and against the skyline you'd be hard pressed to know that this wasn't the real crane. But if you want to go for the max, all the parts are in the box to have a derrick, and here it is pre-assembled, and also a luffing jib, and here it is made up ready. One of the jib struts is already attached at the end, and the other is a separate piece which attaches to the boom head. On Cranes etc. we like our cranes big, so we'll go ahead and add the derrick. To make life easier, the screws have been partially tapped in at the ends before feeding the derrick into the connection point. Once it's in place, then it's easy to tighten up using a screwdriver. The next job is to attach the guys to the A-frame and to connect them using the brass nuts and bolts. Once that's done, you can wind up on the A-frame and that begins to lift the derrick. Next, the Cranes etc. detailing crew come back and add some handrails to the derrick. The derrick increases the capacity of the crane by being attached to a ballast carrier, and that's been modelled really well by NZG. The big wheels all turn independently, and there are a pair of large pull-down supports which are there to provide stability depending on how the wheels are positioned. Both sets of wheels are mounted on their own turntables, so the ballast carrier can be attached to the crane and then towed along when it moves. Another nice little feature which has been added is the access ladders, which can be folded down. To connect the trailer to the crane there's an extra piece, and that attaches to the end of the strut, and then the whole thing is connected to the crane. The strut is telescopic, so it can be fixed in different positions, and the further away it is, the more the crane can lift. Here the strut is connected to the crane, and it's also pinned using large screws because the plastic pins supplied are too loose. There's one bit of detail to add, which is a handrail that goes on the top, and then the counterweight can be added. The real crane can have a total counterweight load on the derrick of 350 tons, so you can imagine that even at this model size you get a very heavy trailer. The last thing to do is to connect the guys from the top of the derrick down to the connection points on the trailer. When all that's done, the derrick is good to go, and the whole thing works really well because you can rotate the crane very smoothly indeed. Next, the luffing jib has been attached and reeved up, which is another couple of hours work, and then we can add some final detail, which is some more walkways. The luffing jib can now be raised to its full height, and for this it's best to use an electric screwdriver. With that done, the model is now fully assembled. And what an impressive crane it is too, because all of the engineering is really good, so the whole of the geometry is excellent. It also feels very strong, so you can be confident that there wouldn't be any model crane disasters. So when it's built big like this, you certainly do have a very impressive model. But how big is it? Let's get the tape out, and to the top it's nearly 78 inches or 200 centimetres. Another very nice touch is that NZG has also provided another lifting head for the top of the boom. This is really a first-class crawler crane model from NZG, and the finished profile for the crane is very realistic. The detailing and functionality is very good, and what's great is the flexibility with which it can be configured in different ways. Without question, it's an outstanding model.